In a starved frontier town, Clara Raines spent her last coin on a single loaf of bread. When the storekeeper smashed a tribal child's hand away from it, she tore the loaf and shoved the larger piece into his fist. Within days, riders from the hills and men with rifles on porches would be staring each other down because of that one stupid, dangerous choice. Before we dive in, tell us in comments where in the world you are watching from. Dust blew in low curl through the open doorway as Clara Raines stepped sideways to keep her fraying skirt from the sweep of the wind. The frontier trading post smelled of coffee, leather, and old fear while tired townsfolk waited with their eyes more on each other than the shelves. At the counter, a small tribal boy reached for a heel of bread and caught only the slap of the store owner's hand against his wrist. "You pay or you get out," the man snapped, shoving the child toward the door. Clara watched, fingers tight around the single loaf she had just bought with her last coins, stomach hollow but heart heavier. She crossed the floor, ignoring the whispers, and broke her bread cleanly in two. Gently she pressed the larger piece into the boy's palm. Murmurs rose as two leather-clad scouts near the doorway stepped forward, faces hardening, reading insult where there was only need. Clara lifted her empty hand, met their eyes, and said, "I don't need it." "He does." The boy stayed up at her. The scouts hesitated, and the whole room waited to see what that one piece of bread would cost them all before nightfall. Dust still clung to her hem when Clara Raines first saw the town rise out of the heat shimmer, a scatter of low roofs and one tall false front promising groceries and dry goods to anyone with more coin than she carried. Her feet ached in her boots, socks worn thin, but she kept one hand on the small bundle at her side and the other pressed over the faded journal tucked close beneath her shawl. The journal had belonged to Eli Raines, her husband, its one stiff cover softened by years of trail dust, the ink inside turning the color of river mud. It was the last thing that still felt like his hand on her shoulder. She passed wagons, nodded at strangers who barely nodded back, and walked toward the trading post because that was where the smell of baking bread drifted warmest. Inside, the air was cooler but not kinder. Men at the counter cut their conversation short and looked her over in that measuring way that weighed sadness and usefulness at the same time. Clara kept her chin level and laid her last tarnished coin on the scarred counter. Eyes on the loaf she knew she could stretch for 3 days if she was careful. The store owner sighed like the transaction inconvenienced him personally, but he slid the bread her way and swept the coin into his apron. She had just lifted the loaf when the door hinges complained and a tribal family stepped inside, the mother's braids dusted with road grit, the child's eyes going straight to the bread rack. Silence hardened the room. One man near the stove muttered something about taking what isn't theirs. Another shifted his coat to show the edge of a pistol that didn't need to be drawn to speak. The owner's mouth tightened as he told them prices had gone up again, higher than anyone without rancher money could pay. Clara felt that old familiar pull between mind and marrow. She had walked too far to give anything away. Yet watching the child's hollow gaze track each loaf, she knew keeping quiet would cost her something far more permanent. Outside, 2 tribal scouts paused by the window, and the first threads of real trouble began to weave around her name. By late afternoon, Clara's half-loaf had become a tale the town chewed over like gristle. Some called her foolish, others swore she was courting favor with the tribe, feeding them while her own tightened their belts. She heard it in the way talk snapped shut when she stepped off the trading post porch, in how mothers drew their children closer as she walked the boardwalk with her small bundle. 2 old men outside the barber shop watched her over their pipes. One muttered that some folks forgot which side they were on. Clara kept moving, boots aching, Eli's faded journal a steady weight beneath her shawl, pressing against her ribs like a hand that refused to let go. Pike Dunn pushed off the hitching rail and fell in beside her, spays ticking, shoulders broad enough to steal the light. "Quite a show you put on in there, widow," he said, voice pitched just high enough to carry to every doorway. "Feeding them while the rest of us scrape by." Clara kept her eyes on the planks. "I fed a hungry child," she replied. "That's all." Pike jerked his chin toward the low hills that hid the tribal camp. "You fed one of them. You think they forget a favor, or come collecting later with torches at our corrals." A few townsfolk paused to admire their own reflections in dusty glass while they listened. Heat climbed Clara's neck, not from shame, but from knowing how quickly fear reached for any fresh excuse. Hunger looks the same on any face, she said softly. You know that. Pike snorted. Them and us don't look the same when it counts, he answered. You hold out bread to wolves, don't complain when they follow the scent to your door. Out by the water trough, the two tribal scouts stood with their ponies, the same men who had watched her in the store. They had followed her into the street without a word, eyes narrowed, trying to fit her into stories they already believed about settlers. Mercy did not belong in those stories, so they waited for the catch, for the price she would demand. Clara turned down a narrow side lane, trading boardwalk for packed dirt, lean-to sheds, and stacked crates behind the polished fronts. Pike came with her, boots grinding gravel. Folks are saying you're angling for something, he pressed. Protection, land, a place in their camp when they finally push through. Clara shook her head. I want to be left alone, she said. That's all. Pike's eyes stayed hard. You don't get alone by stirring both sides. You picked a side when you held out that bread. Footsteps scuffed behind them. One scout had eased into the lane while the other waited with the horses. His gaze slid past Pike's shoulder and settled on the edge of Clara's shawl, where something flat and leather-bound pressed against her hand and refused to be hidden. Dust lay thick behind the livery when Pike stepped in front of Clara and stopped her, one hand flat on the post beside her shoulder. His two ranch hands drifted in behind, closing the way back to the street. Eli's journal dug into her ribs under the shawl, small as a prayer book, suddenly heavy. You don't walk off after that, Pike said, voice low. Feeding one of them in front of everyone isn't charity, it's choosing sides. Clara kept her gaze steady. I chose a hungry child, she answered. Nothing more. Pike's smile was thin. Out here, in this hard land, that's enough to make folks forget who you belong with. A quiet voice came from the alley entrance. Let the woman speak for herself. One of the tribal scouts stood there, palm empty, shoulders loose, his companion half a step behind. Their horses shifted somewhere in the street, iron shoes scraping faintly. The first scout's eyes slid past Pike and fixed on the bulge beneath Clara's shawl. She carries a sign, he said slowly. I know that shape. Clara's fingers tightened over the journal, but Pike moved first. He yanked the shawl aside and snatched the book from her grip. This what you're hiding for them? He demanded. The journal slipped and slapped open on a crate. On the inside cover sat a small mark, a circle cut by a wavering line, 3 short strokes on one bank. The scout stepped closer, eyes widening. Riverman, he whispered, then again in careful English. That is his mark. A breeze flipped the pages to a river sketch, Eli's line bending toward a narrow crossing marked by a small X, and a brief note about dragging a man from the water. The second scout drew a bone token from a pouch, the same river mark burned into its face. Our elder carries scars from that water, he said. A white rider hauled him from the rocks, and he has hunted that rider's kin ever since to repay his breath. Pike snorted. Fine story, he said. The first scout did not flinch. Your paper law did not save him, he said. A man did, and truth remembers what your records do not. He turned to Clara, voice softening. Riverman's wife, he said, giving her a name she had never worn. Come with us, and we guard you as kin. Take you to the elder who waits to repay his breath debt. Stay, and we leave, and tell him his friend's blood chose fear over truth. Clara felt unseen faces pressing close at the alley's edges. Behind her stood Pike's men. Before her, the scouts. At the street, townsfolk pretending not to stare. One side offered fences, wages, and a law that had never bent for her. The other offered nothing sure but honor and Eli's old promise. Law pulled one way, truth the other. If you were Clara, would you trust the tribe or stay with the town? Tell us honestly. She drew a slow breath that tasted of dust and river water and felt the weight of her next step settle between them. Clara's answer in the alley did not hang long. By dusk the scouts rode hard to their camp and returned with riders enough to make the town square pull tight like a knot. They came in slow, horses stepping light, lances upright, and at their center rode an elder wrapped in a river-colored blanket. Clara waited near the livery gate where Pike had cornered her hours before. Eli's journal pressed to her chest like a shield made of paper and memory. Townsfolk who had watched from windows now stood on porches by the well, pretending to busy their hands while they counted how many saddles belonged to them and how few to us. The riders halted where Dirt Street met Well Stones, and the elder slid down without help, old bones stiff but pride unbent. He walked to Clara, studying her face, then turned slowly so every watching eye was caught. Many floods ago, he said in careful English, a white rider pulled me from a river when the water tried to break me. Not your court, not your sheriff. One man. Murmurs rolled like low thunder. A woman near the mercantile whispered Eli's name, and Pike heard it. He stepped off the store porch, hat pushed back, voice loud enough to be lured by sound alone. Any widow can claim her dead man was your river hero, he said. You ride in armed, call her kin, and we're meant to bow. A few men muttered agreement, grateful for someone to lean their fear against. The elder did not look at Pike. From a pouch at his belt, he drew a carved bone token and turned it in the light. One side showed the river mark from Clara's journal. The other carried 2 neat letters. Clara's fingers shook. He carved that, she whispered. Said it was only for luck. The elder lifted the token high so town and tribe alike could see it. Then, to Pike's visible shock, he sank to one knee in the dust before her. Even the horses seemed to hold their breath. I return my life debt, he said. Riverman's wife, speak, and my people will hear. For a heartbeat, Clara felt the pull of vengeance, the weight of every slight she could bring down. Instead, she drew a steady breath. Then hear this, she said. No torches, no raids. Guard your young, and let ours grow beside them. Hats came off, eyes dropped, and in that quiet, the balance of the town began, finally, to lean toward peace. Weeks after the elder knelt in the dust, Clara walked into a quiet clearing at sunset, the sky washed in copper and lavender. Tribal women laid out baskets of dried meat, corn, and late apples at her feet, enough to see her through the lean months. Hunters traced a circle in the date, marking safe paths her boots and wagon could follow through their lands. The elder lifted Eli's carved token once more, then pressed it into her palm, not as a debt, but as a door she could cross whenever fear rose again. Winter came hard and early, yet for the first time, riders from town and camp cut would side by side, shared watchfires, and sent game across the lines instead of bullets. Arguments still flared, but no bonds burned, no herds vanished in the snow. By spring, a low log meeting house stood between town and river. Clara stepped inside, placed Eli's faded journal on a central shelf, and left it there where anyone could read how one man's mercy had bent a river's course. And if your heart is still listening, stay quietly with us for the next story of mercy and justice on the frontier.